So when you look at the Portland Trailblazers, it's almost as if they've been two different teams this season. There was the team from October 18th to January 16th, which was a 500 team. They're like 22-21, something like that. And then since January 16th, they've been one of the best teams in the NBA. And it hasn't really been rocket science as to why they got so much better. They maintained their defense, which has been the biggest revelation for them this season. I mean, you look at Lillard and McCollum actually improving on defense to the point now where I think we can consider both of them at least average, whereas they used to just be flat out bad. That's an accomplishment. And then with Mo Harkless, Aminu, Nurkic, Ed Davis, Evan Turner's actually been pretty okay. You just put all that together and, you got Terry Stotts, who's a decent head coach if you ask me, and there you go. You're able to be a quality defensive team. I mean, of course, ever since they acquired Yusuf Nurkic, they've been a really quality team on that side of the floor. We remember the run they went on last season, and their defensive rating just spiked up. That's been basically the same all throughout this year. Their defensive rating has been around 104, according to NBA.com. But where the big jump came for them was offensively. Between the beginning of the season and mid-January, their offensive rating was also 104, which makes sense that they were basically a 500 team. Since January 16th, their offensive rating has been 110, which is 6th in the NBA. And really, I think it's just come down to two things. Number one, they're making like a couple more free throws a game. Their free throw percentage is a little higher. But the other thing is that they're shooting like 5 more three-pointers a game, and Damian Lillard has just gone to another level as a player, okay? He is shooting, I believe it's like 2 more free throws a game since mid-January, which tells you he's just attacking even more often. I think in February his usage rate was around 33%, which is a bit higher than it was for the first 40 games or so for them when they were just a super mediocre team. And he's also just been a little better of a three-point shooter. His catch-and-shoot threes have actually been way better. I think first half of the season he was like 26-27% on catch-and-shoots, and then since mid-January he's been above 40%. And then, of course, you have all the other things. I mean, he's one of the elite pick-and-roll players in the league. It makes sense because of how athletic he is and the fact that he can hit, like, pull-up mid-range and all that. And he's also great at finishing, and he gets fouled all the damn time. He's in, like, the 97th percentile of pick-and-roll ball handlers. And then that really has been it. Like, CJ, Aminu, Mo Harkless, Nurkic, Zach Collins, Evan Turner, Pat Connaughton, Shabazz Napier, these guys have all been around the same in terms of any stat you want to look at. Traditional stats, advanced stats, minutes. It's all been very similar. It's just Lillard has taken them to a different level as a team. Now, if you want to look at that and you say, okay, well, what can they do in the postseason? How scary are they in a round one matchup and all those things? So round one, if the playoffs stay the way they are now, they would be playing the Spurs in the first round. Now, if the Spurs had a healthy Kawhi Leonard, then I would pick San Antonio, but the Spurs also wouldn't be the 6th seed. They would be right up there with the Rockets and Warriors, and potentially even better than Golden State with how lackadaisical they've been this season and the injuries that they have now. But there's no Kawhi, and even if Kawhi does come back, you can't really assume at this point that he's going to just hop in there and be his 25-point incredible defensive self. So as a result, I would pick Portland in that series. I think Lillard and McCollum would give the Spurs a lot of trouble in the pick and roll. I know that the Spurs had their big guys just lay back on the Rockets, but Lillard and especially McCollum are very comfortable taking mid-range jumpers. They're also a bit more athletic than James Harden is, to where even if you back up on them on the pick and roll, they might just blow by you anyway. I also think with how good of a defensive team Portland has been this season, the Spurs would have a tough time scoring on them. Because, I mean, between Harkless and Aminu, and, I mean, you can say Lillard and McCollum at this point, they have a decent amount of switchy defenders, and San Antonio doesn't really have a big go-to scorer if Kawhi's not going to be himself. And I also think LaMarcus Aldridge would have a lot of problems dealing with Nurkic, because Aldridge goes to the low post a lot, and, I mean, Yusuf's a pretty strong dude. Aldridge would have to rely on a lot of jump shots, which he can make, but I don't think this is Aldridge of, what was it, 3 to 5 years ago, whatever it was, when he was just hitting every mid-range jumper against Houston, when Dwight Howard didn't want to step out on him. Like, I don't think that Aldridge is necessarily here anymore. So I think they would do away with the Spurs. The Timberwolves could be interesting. Now, if there's no Jimmy Butler, then they're going to beat the T-Wolves with not much trouble. If Jimmy Butler is back and he's himself, I mean, the interesting thing would be, do you just attack Towns and Wiggins all the time on defense? I mean, it would be easier to attack Towns because you can just put him in pick and rolls, and I think he would have a tough time with that. I also believe that Damian Lillard is just a better player than Jimmy Butler is. I know Butler's a better defender and all that, but I think at a certain point, the ability to just put up 40 points out of nowhere is more valuable than being the all-around guy who puts up like low to mid-20s. There's also the fact of Minnesota has been a pretty bad team on the road this season, and I think some of that comes with having the younger players who just, you know, it's just a thing where young dudes just seem to have trouble on the road sometimes. And Portland is a really good home team. You know, that's kind of been well documented for a while. And they would have the home court advantage in that series. So if anything, if it went 7 games, Portland would just win all 4 games at home. Now, do I think Nurkic would have trouble with Towns? Stepping out on the perimeter, yes. I think defending in the post, he could actually maybe be one of the guys in the league who could actually give Towns some trouble. I feel like Towns' post-up game is a little underrated. He's like a devastating post-up player. He's in the 87th percentile of post-ups, and I mean he's got the hook shots, he's got some turnarounds, but he's also just more athletic than most centers, so he can just get by you that way. It would definitely be a good series, them and the T-Wolves. I don't know, maybe it's just the home court advantage, but I would probably side with the Blazers there. Now, one thing with Portland we should talk about is teams are going to dare the other guys to shoot. I mean, last night the Rockets dared Aminu to kill them from outside, and he kind of went nuts from 3. I don't remember how many he hit, but it was quite a lot. And I know Mo Harkless had at least 1 3-pointer, and Harkless is always the interesting one because while Aminu has grown to be pretty comfortable on his threes, he takes like 4 or 5 a game. Harkless is still kind of wishy-washy. He only takes about 2 to 2.5 a game, and if he's feeling it, he'll put it up pretty quickly, but if he's not, he might try to do something off the dribble, and sometimes his post-up game is there depending on the matchup, other times it isn't. That's an X factor for him, you know? I mean, if you can have one offensive player that just isn't doing much of anything, then that could be really tough. I mean, the one I remember is Tony Allen on the Warriors, or against the Warriors, when they just didn't care about his existence, and suddenly the Grizzlies' offense just fell apart. Now, do you have some replacements? Kind of. I mean, Evan Turner with Lillard and McCollum has actually been an okay player, you know, net rating-wise and all that this season. Connaughton, I wish he was a better three-point shooter than he actually is. Like, he has the profile of a dude who is like a knockdown shooter, but he's not up to that level, at least this season. Like, he only takes 2.5 threes a game, so I don't know. If you dare him to shoot from out there, maybe he won't knock him down either. There are some fears with this Blazers team. I really wish they had just one real knockdown shooter off the bench. I mean, they could have been a really good destination for like Bellinelli or even Ilyasova. Now, if we look at some other potential opponents for them in the West, I mean, just look at all the teams around the Spurs and the T-Wolves, because this is that close. I mean, say if they drew the Pelicans in round 1, which is, that's pretty possible. I mean, Anthony Davis would be the best player in the series. I think the Blazers are a better overall team. I mean, if Anthony Davis played 40 minutes a night at center, then, that's a pretty scary thing to face, unless you're the Rockets or the Warriors, if you ask me. I mean, I think Anthony Davis is that good to where he can win a series by himself. I don't know, though. The one thing with the Pelicans I've noticed is whenever they've gone up against some of the better teams in the league recently, like the Rockets, the Jazz, the Wizards, they always lose. A lot of their wins lately have been against like some bad teams, like they beat the Celtics, the injury-ridden Celtics. Their last win was against the Mavericks. The win before that was against the Hornets. Maybe Portland would just be simply too good of a roster top to bottom to where even Anthony Davis couldn't win it. If you look at Utah, I think the goal to beat the Jazz is just to load up on Donovan Mitchell and force everybody else to beat you. And I think Portland defensively would be good enough for that. And then I think Lillard and McCollum could give Gobert some problems. At least, I say some. I mean, he would still be able to deflect shots, block shots, scare guys from going into the paint. Like, he's always going to have that effect. But I do think there would be a couple extra possessions where he doesn't want to step up on the screen all the way and then Lillard hits a pull-up 3 on him, that type of thing. Portland's good, man. They're good, no doubt about it. And if Lillard's going to maintain being this good, then I think we could see them winning the round 1 matchup. And I mean, depending on how things are going with the Warriors, like, yeah, you still pick them to win, but I mean, if Curry's ankle is at 75%, if Draymond really is just like 10% worse on defense, and that mentality that they've been carrying with them all season where they're like, all right, we'll figure it out when we need to. Like, they're 10th in defense this year, which is a drastic drop-off. I mean, I don't know, maybe they could push them to 6 games. Potentially, you win a couple of home games where the crowd gets into it and you hit like 4 out of 5 threes and suddenly you're up 13 points. It's an idea. So that's what I gotta say about the Blazers. They're good. They may be the 3rd best team in the West. If Corey Brewer keeps on being Ray Allen, then maybe that's not the case, but I don't think that's going to hold up. Yeah, the Blazers are good.